This week, the Clarets finally get a taste of football in Project Restart. And what a week. This is the chaos that has been the first 3 games of Project Restart. This is the Nona Never podcast. Hello and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of your favourite Nona Never podcast. Well, what a week that has been, Clarets fans. We have got so many issues to pick through this evening. I don't even know where to start. Of course, the Clarets finally got their taste of football at that always easy game, Manchester City away. And let's be honest, it went exactly the way that we expected it to. But then that was followed by 2 fantastic wins that have ended that 3-game spell with us all getting very excited about another European tour, albeit on a socially distant basis. And in between all of that, we've had fans falling out with other fans, we've had players falling out with fans, we've had Dyche falling out with his chairman, we've had injury crisis, contract palaver. Where do we even start? Well, I'll tell you where we start. We go to our wonderful panellists, who I'm delighted to introduce this evening. As joining me, Tom Whittaker. Tom, welcome back. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks very much. Nice to be back as ever.
Excellent. And drum roll, please. Listeners, guess who's back? Robbie's back again. Robbie Coppack, we thought you'd quit.
I felt like it because our season's I after the City debacle, I wanted to quit Burnley completely.
You're so dramatic, Robbie. Every time we hear from you, like, oh my god, you're one of those guys that never lost the teenage tantrums. I love it. I love listening to it. But welcome back. It's nice to have you on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I can't wait to talk about the Palace win because I think that Palace win was probably one of my favourites as a Burnley fan. I think.
Same, absolutely. Well, we're going to get on to that. We've got obviously so much to pick out here, but some of it, we started the week in a bit of a not downward spiral, that sounds dramatic, but we started the week in a bit of a downturn because we had just the absolute chaos with everything that seemed to derail us on the day of the City game. So I want to unpick a couple of those things first because I want to end the podcast on a positive note with the incredible wins against Watford and Palace and just where the hell we go from here. And I'm going to get the worst of it out of the way to start off with. You haven't heard from us, you've heard from myself and Dave briefly in the preview show, but you haven't heard from us in the main show about the stunt at Manchester City. Now, I have absolutely no qualms whatsoever in declaring with absolute certainty that the plane stunt that happened over the Etihad before that game was absolutely disgusting. I was horrified by it. I condone it 100%. And the idiots who arranged it, quite frankly, have got no place in my club. I'm going to read out an email from Stuart Parkinson, who's a long-time listener of the show. Stuart, apologies. I did have every intention of replying to this lovely email, and I just haven't had a chance to. So please forgive me. But Stuart's really nicely summed up, I think, what a lot of us normal, decent human beings who are associated with the club feel. It started off by saying, actually, that him and his wife were lucky enough to get on the Premier League fan wall. Well done, Stuart. I've been seeing those at all of the games in Project Restart, and I did wonder how people were getting on those. I must have missed some announcement, and quite frankly, I can't believe they didn't ring me personally. I'm joking. But yeah, Stuart and his wife got on the fan wall, and he did say he was settling down to watch the Clarets pull off an unlikely win. I'm not quite sure how many shandies he'd had before that game, Stuart, because we never win at Etihad. And this paragraph sums it up for me. And it just says, I feel utterly ashamed and completely outraged by the stunt that these guys pulled, and possibly more so by those online who've been supporting and defending it. I back the club's statement 100%, but I can't help but feel that more action needs to be done here. Robbie, I'm going to come to you first with this one because I know you were particularly affected by this stunt. And I mean, listen, for the sake of recap, everybody has seen this, but of course we're talking about the early stages of the City game. The players had just done their minute silence in respect for people who'd lost their lives in the COVID pandemic and in respect to our National Health Service workers. And then, as is customary and has been in with every single game, the players all took the knee for the first 10 seconds of the game to show solidarity and respect for the Black Lives Matter movement. At that precise moment, a plane was flown above the Etihad, which had a banner on the back of it that said "White Lives Matter," and it was punctuated by Burnley, just to make it absolutely clear that it came from Burnley. Robbie, what a horrible, horrible way to start our football back in this project.
Yeah, and it'd been tough enough with the pandemic and stuff like that, and football pausing for quite a while, and I sort of wanted to use football as a sort of a sense of escapism from everything that was going on around the world. And then we had to wait all weekend, got to that Monday night, and even though I sort of expected us to get beat convincingly, I was actually quite looking forward to watching us again. And then the game barely got underway, and I was just absolutely astounded of what had happened. And it was just upsetting because, like I said, I wanted to use football as a sense of escapism, and now it's all coming back, that stress and that sort of how it affects us all. And then not only that, it's sort of, I saw things on my timeline from fans from other football clubs who, like, they all just go, "Oh, typical Burnley fans this." And it's like, it's not typical Burnley fans. And that's what really annoyed me the most. And that's why I got particularly vocal about it, to try and like defend myself and defend other, like, majority of other Burnley fans who aren't racist and don't have a mindset like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was one of those where I saw it the first sort of couple of minutes of the game, and it started to circulate on social media, and I was like, "Oh God, please let this be a photoshopped, like, ridiculous meme that's going around, or don't let this be real." And then slowly but surely, Tom, the report started to come through that it wasn't a prank, it was real. And then you're almost clutching desperately at the hope that it's maybe a Blackburn fan or a Preston fan or somebody doing that to us as a bit of a joke. And then that very quickly got quashed, and we realised that it was in fact a small section of Burnley fans who wanted to make a protest against the Black Lives Matter movement. And I just felt sick. And I couldn't breathe. And I genuinely didn't watch much of the first half because I was just looking at my phone, just desperately trying to make sense of this entire situation.
Yeah, I felt similar. The game sort of became a secondary consideration after that. It was, it really felt like a gut punch because it's by putting that word Burnley at the end of the banner, it's not just like a group. It's associating that with all of us and people who haven't asked to be associated with that, and obviously would never associate with that. I suppose it felt a lot more personal because of that. I was pretty much the same. It was difficult to sort of concentrate on the game after that. I haven't got too many memories of it. I couldn't tell you what the goals were like, really.
No, I'm the same. I think it was just maybe the Ben Mee penalty was probably the one that sticks out more. But Tom, do you think it affected the players? Because we never got going in that game, and I would say that. And I mean, City away is always going to be a difficult game, but we looked so uncharacteristically bad for a Burnley side.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to say because I know obviously Ben Mee spoke really well about it after the game. I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. And he did mention that he said that it had an effect on the players. I didn't know if he meant by that they just saw that and obviously had the visceral reaction that a few of us have spoken about that we had to it, or that he meant that it affected the performance. I think it's difficult for me to say that it had that much effect on the game or on the performance, just because I mean we've seen that kind of performance level and result at Man City before, so I couldn't necessarily put it down to what was there. Obviously there was other mitigating factors. City had already got a game to get back into the groove of it. City are making 5 or 6 subs and we haven't got any to make, so I wouldn't want to say that it had a massive effect on the game, but obviously Ben Mee did say that the players had seen it beforehand, and he used the words that it did affect us. So it certainly didn't help. Put it that way.
No, it didn't. It must have had some bearing on their mental preparation for that game, because they will have known, they will have seen it. And apparently, actually, Ben Mee did come out and say that they had been warned, hadn't they, before the game, that this stunt was being pulled. And apparently the club had tried to stop it, but were not able to. So that must have been on their minds. They'll have been expecting it, and then when they heard the plane, they will have known exactly what that was. A couple of people reporting that they saw the players looking up to the sky and shaking their heads in disgust. So I think that, they clearly share our disgust with that. Robbie, one thing that Tom mentioned there was Ben Mee's interview, and I'm going to end on this because the shining light from the end of that shitty, horrible night, pardon my language, listeners, was just the eloquence and the unbelievable sense of responsibility that Ben Mee showed when he came out to the press. He didn't mess around. He didn't want to speak about. He had no intention of speaking about the game. He wanted to address it head on. He wanted to speak for his players and his club, and I thought he did an incredible job.
Yeah, it brought back a sense of pride back to me anyway. I think the most pleasing thing about it is that it didn't feel like a PR stunt either. It didn't. The statements that he made, it didn't feel as if the club PR team had encouraged him to do that. I hadn't really given him like a brief statement to make. It was like purely from the heart, and that's what you want from your leader, and yeah, I think it brought back a bit of pride back for me anyway, and yeah, because I think if the Burnley PR team had sort of made a statement on his behalf, it would certainly feel a bit fake, and it would have just probably made the situation an awful lot worse. But for Ben to come out 10-15 minutes after the game, where it's still probably hurting a little bit, just helps just bring back a good name towards us, genuine, proper Burnley fans.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to say though, Robbie, I thought the Burnley statement that they put out at half time, considering they had 45 minutes to get that together, I thought it was a very powerful statement. It got the respect of the media, and I think what Darren and his team did was shut down any escalating feelings that this was a club thing, or the media were very good to back them and were very quick to distance the club and the vast majority of the fans and the players away from this stunt. And actually I feel like, rather than, I know we were concerned about this, about being tarred with this brush, I think we actually came out of this with a lot of support in the football community, and people highlighting the fantastic things that the club do in the community, the work we've done with the BAME community themselves, and just dragging ourselves into the 21st century and appreciating that there are people here who are suffering and are in need of our support and help at this moment in time. So the club have confirmed that the individuals responsible have got lifetime bans. Good. You are not welcome at our club, and quite frankly, I don't want to see your face anywhere near Turf Moor again. And we move on, and hopefully, I mean, this is an initiative that the Premier League have taken on as in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, and everybody has their own feelings towards it. Everybody has their own ideas as to what can change and what needs to change. I'm not going to sit here and impose on people attitudes and views and what you should do. The only thing that we would ask from you, on behalf of everybody at No One and Never, is just listen, read, educate yourselves, and try and understand the point that our BAME community are telling us as to the prejudices that they are feeling on a regular basis, and why they are just not given the same opportunities that everybody else is, purely because of the colour of their skin, and that cannot be allowed to continue. So please, if you don't understand, take some time out to read and to listen, and hopefully we can all work towards a more equal life for everybody. So, Tom, moving away from the plane stunt, obviously on the pitch, things didn't exactly go to plan either. I know, like we've said here, none of us really watched the game, and it was quite a painful game. Just the only thing I think I will pick out from a game perspective, I maintain to this day that penalty was a soft penalty. I wouldn't want to see that given on the other end. And actually, as we say a lot of the time, do we really think that that's given for Burnley against a Manchester City defender at the other end? Do you share that opinion, or do you think it was a cast iron penalty that Ben Mee gave?
I don't think it was a nailed-on penalty. I think a lot of the pundits were talking in the studio at half-time. The point they were making was that you didn't see any Man City players appealing for it. You didn't see anyone on the pitch that thought it was a penalty. I think when you see the replay back, you can understand why it was given. Aguero's got there just slightly in front of him, and he has caught him. I think it's one of them. It reminded me a little bit of the Chris Wood one against Leicester. The goal that we had disallowed there. A minor bit of contact. If you're in the VAR, you can give whatever you want to give there. Just because it's contact doesn't mean it's a foul necessarily. But there seems to be a desire to overrule the ref and to give daft stuff, and that's what it looked like to me. It seems for whatever reason they were leaning towards a penalty and they gave it. I don't think anyone would have complained if that hadn't been given, but I can see where they got it from at the very least.
Yeah, I think it's just frustrating from my perspective, and I appreciate I'm very much saying this with claret tinted glasses on, but we had the ridiculous scenario at the start of Project Restart where the goal line technology wasn't working or wasn't switched on properly or whatever it was that happened there. So, we've got a perfectly good goal for Sheffield United ruled out because it went over the line and wasn't given. But then we're trying to find the tightest of margins to, either award a penalty or stop another goal going on. I think it's not really been talked about since we got back, hasn't the problems with VAR, because other things have rightly taken over. But something has to change for next season, and I think we are going to see a second wave of evolution of VAR. I think next season. Robbie, a couple of other things that very much overshadowed the performances on the pitch and the way we were all feeling about football coming back at the City game was, of course, just the ridiculous scenario of the actual extent of the injury problems and the contract situations coming out of the club, and this bizarre rumbling that Dyche has fallen out with Mike Garlick. So let's take the Dyche versus Garlick battle first, because this is something that even after the week that we've had is still refusing to go away, and even after the post-match interviews after the Palace game, Dyche was still being questioned about his relationship with his chairman and whether he was seeking other opportunities. And I'm not entirely sure that Dyche has done sufficient to make those rumours go away. But Robbie, the rumours were coming around that it was the contract situation that has caused the problem. Now, looking at the contracts, let's take the contracts first. Can you believe we're in this situation, even by Burnley standards? Talk us through this.
Yeah, it is a strange one. It's like, for a sense of perspective, in a normal environment, we probably wouldn't be too fussed about Jeff Hendrick being let go. Personally, I would have kept him anyway, but under normal circumstances, I don't think a lot of Burnley fans would have complained too much. That goes for the same with Joe Hart, Aaron Lennon, Adam Legzins, Phil Bardsley. Despite him being a first choice, he is like, he's one of the older players in the squad, so you want to bring that age gap down. And so, as a sense of perspective, you can sort of understand why there might have been a bit of hesitancy in terms of offering new deals and stuff like that. But it's a Jeff Hendrick one for me, which is the most ridiculous, because he's arguably a first team player, regardless of what you think. Dyche obviously rates him. He obviously sees him as that sort of a bit like what Scott Arfield was, where he played in that wide midfield role. He just plays wherever he's been told to, and always does a job. He's never really you're never going to get a 10 out of 10 performance out of him, but you're always going to get those consistent 7 out of 10s. And the rumour was that Hendrick wanted to sort of be on the same tier as our key players in terms of James Tarkowski and Chris Wood, Nick Pope, and the board didn't see it like that. But if Dyche rates him as that, then surely you've got to give what the manager wants, because you're supposed to back the manager. But you can sort of understand the board's like stance on it as well, because obviously they know the financial like detail, the small details which us fans don't really understand. So it's a really tough one to really complain about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. Is that, Robbie? I think. Well, obviously we know that the players that are leaving. Let's just have a quick recap here, because I'm going to come on to the others in a moment. We know that it was the players that were all out of contract, that the rumours were coming around they would be leaving and they weren't available to play, are Jeff Hendrick, Aaron Lennon, Joe Hart, Adam Legzdins, apologies, I can't pronounce your surname, and of course Bardsley. Now, you're right, Robbie, that Hendrick is probably the one out of all of those that's top of the list. Well, I think let's say, with all due respect, Joe Hart, Adam Legzdins, and Aaron Lennon. Okay, fine. Lennon was probably looking for something else. Lennon's been very much a fringe player. The other two, we had way too many keepers anyway. Obviously, we've got some new younger keepers coming in, so we can get rid of those. Joe Hart has been basically touting himself for a move for about 18 months, so we knew that was going to go. So essentially, out of those 5 players, we whittle this down and we go, you know what? It's really mainly Phil Bardsley and Jeff Hendrick that we're worried about here. Now, I agree with you, Robbie. Now, let's be realistic, listeners. None of us know what's gone on behind closed doors, because quite appropriately, we are not party to the ins and outs of the club. We don't know what the conversations are had. We don't know about the finances. We don't know what decisions are being made, because we're just fans and we are told the information that's released. So we can only speculate on the bits of information that are released in the press. And we are led to believe that, yes, an improved contract was offered to Jeff Hendrick, which was better than the money's on now, but he wouldn't sign that because he wanted to be on the top salary that our likes of Pope, Wood are on, etc. Robbie, you're absolutely right. As much as I love Jeff Hendrick, I don't think that warrants him. I don't think his performances or his position in the first team warrant him being able to demand that higher salary. But you're right. If that one signing is going to annoy your manager that much, where you cause a potentially unrepairable rift between chairman and manager, that has to take, surely. You agree, don't you, Robbie? That has to take precedent here. I think that Hendrick had to be the one that was saved if it was going to stop this problem between him and Dyche.
Yeah, and obviously Sean Dyche's been at the club for 7.5 years. Like, obviously he has his restrictions in terms of the transfer market, and obviously with the pandemic and stuff like that, we don't really know what the transfer market is going to be like in the summer. So you think it'd be a cheaper option even to give Jeff Hendrick what he wants, instead of letting him go on a free and then having to buy someone for 10+ million quid, probably on a higher salary now. So it's a bit of a, but like I say, the board are more likely to know all the finer details which we don't understand. So it's hard to really I don't want to stick the knife in too much, because I think the board obviously they've got the best interest of the club. So it's hard, because they are like burn the fans at the end of the day. Like, they want what's best, and also it's also worth noting that the board have been strict with the transfer budget and the wage budget, and we have this structure in place for an awful long time, and it's proved successful. So it's also like, you don't also want to break that for one player.
No, that's true.
So it's
especially a fringe player.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, if you just let Jeff Hendrick go, we might qualify for Europe again, and we might still be on the course of success like we've been on for the last 7.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, you made a really good point about this, about Hendrick being a strange, if it is true what the rumours are, and that Dyche is looking for an exit out of the club because of this argument he's had with his chairman, that Hendrick does seem like a strange player for Dyche to fall on his sword for, isn't he?
Yeah, I think probably it's not just about it being Jeff Hendrick. I mean, like, if it was a case of keep him or I'm leaving, I mean, I'm in the camp with Robbie. Like, I don't think if it was a normal season, I don't think anyone would be that bothered if he was going. I think he's eminently replaceable. I think it's more the principle of it. I think what the Dyche's biggest problem about it is not that we haven't been able to get a new contract sorted for him in the last 6 weeks. I think it's that we've not been able to get a contract sorted for him in the last 18 months. And I do agree with the point that if, as much as I'm not fussed about him, if Dyche wanted to keep him, then we should be looking at keeping him. And you can say, oh, yeah, he wanted X amount and we couldn't sort it out in these last 6 weeks. And, it's come to a deadline and we haven't been able to get it over the line. We've had 18 months to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that, people are saying, oh, Milan are interested, and why would he have stayed if Milan are interested? Fine. They wouldn't have been interested 18 months ago. They're only having him because he's on a free. So for me, that's the problem, and I think that's the frustration for Dyche. Is not that it's not been done in the last 6 weeks; it's that it's not been done in the last 18 months. And obviously, that's symptomatic of the bigger problem, which is the fact that that we're not stretching the budget, as he says, enough for his liking. And if it's monetary concerns that have meant that Hendrick's left, if you Dyche, you're thinking, well, I've earned this club £500 million in the last few years.
Yeah, exactly.
Towards Jeff Hendrick, I can see where his frustrations are.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just put in as well? Sorry.
Of course you can. Go ahead.
Yeah, and also the frustration is that Jeff Hendrick is regarded as a first team player, and we
is he though?
Well, I think he's obviously been played the majority of the games on the right hand side of midfield, so I certainly put him as a first team player. But I just forgot to add that the bigger frustration is for me that we managed to extend Robbie Brady's contract, so he's not kicked a ball for 2 years. And it's like, we've been, again, it's sort of like Robbie Brady's probably worth keeping around because he probably is like a fringe player, but Jeff Hendrick is a far more important player than Robbie Brady. And we managed to sort Brady out, but Jeff Hendrick, who's regarded as one of Dyche's favourite players, is just disregarded.
Yeah, but we don't know that for sure, though, Robbie. Robbie Brady may very well be on less money and may have been quite happy. Robbie Brady's demands may not have been as perhaps unreasonable, and I'd say that with quotation marks around it. So if Robbie Brady's happy at the club, happy with the wages that's being offered and happy with the deal and wants to sign, there's no problem. You've got to bear in mind here that, and I'm sure, maybe if anybody who's listening can maybe correct me on this if I've seen it, but I'm absolutely sure that this Hendrick, like Tom said, this Hendrick contract situation has been rumbling on for 18 months, and I'm sure he's rejected about 3 or 4 different contracts. I remember at the Player of the Year Awards last year, this was being talked about, that he was potentially going last summer because they couldn't agree a deal. So if Burnley have offered him improved terms and he's still holding out, I don't know, you've got to bear in mind that a lot of this may very well be that the player was never going to sign anyway. I don't know. Who knows? But Tom, I think we seem to have already replaced him on the pitch, though, don't we? We've got somebody who we've unearthed in the last couple of games who's very much stepped into the Hendrick role. Yeah,
it makes you wonder when you see Brownhill back with that Alice band and stuff. Was that the power all along? Is it the Alice band to run up and down the right side?
It's the hair. Yeah, as soon as Hendrick cut his hair, it was like, "No, mate, you're out. No contact." But no, all joking aside, Brownhill, bearing in mind as well, I thought he struggled a little bit against City, but crikey, we all did. But considering that he's made the step up from the Championship and he's not played yet, he's been training with the team all the way through all of this. He's then had the break for the lockdown, and he's not been training with his team. Considering that this is his third, the Palace game was his 3rd game in, my God, that trajectory was massive. He looked like he'd been playing in the Premier League all his life.
Yeah, and in a position he doesn't play as well. I have to say, obviously, the City game, that's a writer for everybody, as you say. I've seen a few people giving him some praise after the Watford game. I thought he struggled a little bit in that one, especially in the first half. Missed a couple of chances. His touch to set up McNeil's cross for the goal was fantastic. Perhaps he got a bit of confidence from that, because I'm with you. Palace, he was fantastic. Him and Bardsley did a job on Zaha. Let's face it, our right-hand midfielder, Jeff Hendrick's not in there to beat men and cross balls into the box. He's there to stop the fullbacks bombing up and down and provide cover for the midfield, and that was the job that Brownhill was doing. And as you say, he looked like he'd been doing it all his life. So I think
it was really good.
Yeah, when you look at his kind of career trajectory at Bristol City, he pops up with the odd spectacular goal, works hard. I think he'll be a more than adequate replacement for Hendrick. The only problem that leaves you with is now you've got to find someone to replace Brownhill in the middle. But very promising. And can I say, he put a lovely ball in the middle of the first half. I think it just evaded everybody, but that was one better cross than I've ever seen Hendrick put in.
True, that's true, and that is the problem. I think this brings me on to the wider point about all of this, and we're trying to build a profile of why Dyche is grumbling at the moment. It isn't just the Hendrick situation; it was also the Bardsley situation, who we did manage to get back on a deal, and it's probably been made worse by the fact that we've just got a ridiculous amount of injuries at the moment, and it just seems to be getting worse. I mean, we've got. Before we even started City, we knew that both Wood and Barnes were out, so we had Jane and Matty Vidra up front. We knew that who else was missing? I can't remember. Oh, JBG was missing. Brady was missing. So if you think we're starting that City game with all those released players, plus 4 senior injuries as well, and a squad that's as small as us, it was always going to look worse than it was. But as Tom rightly points out, if Brownhill makes a step up to the first team and is a brilliant replacement, it just leaves us once again very shallow in terms of depth of the squad. And we started this season being told that Dyche had the most competitive squad he's ever worked with, and we had 2 players for every single position. And it's just not the case anymore. So it's so obvious that we need to have a very strong summer in terms of bringing bodies in. And Tom, we started with re-signing Phil Bardsley. Now, I've seen a lot of people, particularly on Radio Lancashire, on the press, saying that they weren't particularly bothered about Bardsley and they shouldn't really be investing in a 35-year-old right back. But I'm really pleased that we hired him, that we got him back, and I think Dyche will be too.
Yeah, when we signed him, I was a bit sceptical. We've not got a great record at signing 30-plus-year-olds from Stoke City, and I've never been that impressed when I've seen him, but he's turned me around. Really solid, really dependable. One of them players who's 7 out of 10 every week. He's not spectacular, but he always puts a shift and he always does a good job. And his fitness as well, for saying he's 35, he'd not played for ages before Monday night, and he looked like he'd never been away. He's got Zaha to shackle, and he normally struggles against Zaha as well, to be fair, but he did a superb job on him on Monday. I think, another year, it sort of kicks that can down the road another year. We'd need to buy in someone at right back if we weren't going to re-sign him. And considering we're going to have a summer where we're going to be needing to bring a few bodies through the door, it's one less position to worry about for another year. So, yeah, in my eyes, it's a no-brainer. Another one as well where you say if the manager wants him, then get him signed. So, yeah, I was happy to get that one over the line, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure. And Robbie, do you have any problems with any of the other 3 that got released? I guess the 2 keepers we're not too concerned about, but Lennon's a bit of a funny one, really. I can't quite my mind. It's one of those where I wasn't too bothered that he was released, but similarly, I wouldn't have particularly minded if we'd have given him another deal.
Yeah, it's just another player you got to replace. That's how I see it, because it's just more money to spend, isn't it? And obviously with the pandemic and stuff, like I said, we don't really know what the transfer market's going to look like. So ideally, you probably would have kept Aaron Lennon around, just because he's another one who sort of divides opinion, but we've seen the quality he does have. I think the 2, I can only think of like 2 good performances from him in 2 years, and they were both against Bournemouth, but he's obviously got that in his locker. So for me, probably worth keeping around.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But like you say, as long as I imagine we'll probably be able to replace Lennon relatively cheaply. I would have thought Lennon was perhaps on quite big salary demands when he came, because he was quite a big name for us to sign at the time that he did. So perhaps they're thinking that they can get a similar kind of player for less wages. Who knows? But Tom, I think we're still in this situation now where the arguments I guess the reports that there is a serious, irreparable relationship breakdown between our chairman, Mike Garlick, and manager Sean Dyche, they just don't seem to be going away. I know you've had some quite clear thoughts on this. Do we have to now seriously face the prospect of losing Dyche in the summer, however long and whenever that summer may be? And if so, where do we think he's likely to go? I mean, I guess the question I put to you, Tom, is this risk real?
Yeah, I think you'd be daft to dismiss it out of hand. Dyche has said in the press that it's one falling out in 8 years, which isn't bad going, but it's the most public fallout, and there's a reason that any manager would take it public. It's either, an attempt to kind of force the board's hand. He knows the fans are going to back him, so perhaps he's trying to get a bit of pressure on Garlick to spend a bit more money in the summer. Or is he alerting other clubs and clubs that might potentially be interested in his services in the summer that, look, I'm not happy here, come and get me, sort of thing. I suppose it depends if your glass is half empty or half full as to how you see it. I think it's been interesting. You say it's not going away. I think part of that is because after every match he gets a mic shoved under his nose and they ask him, "Are you leaving?" And he's always played a straight bat with those questions. He never comes out and says, "Yeah, I'm probably going to leave," and he never comes out and says, "Yeah, I'm definitely staying." And why would you? Because I'm sure he's probably in the boat of he doesn't know yet. It depends what's coming up, like you say, and there's a limited pool that he could go to. I think he's not going to get a top 6 job, I don't think. We know obviously that route's quite barred for a lot of sort of younger up and coming British managers. His kind of style of play and his track record don't necessarily suggest he should be walking into a top 6 job either, in terms of cup runs, things like that. The jobs that I'd be worried about are the clubs that are around us but with a bit more potential. So like a lot of teams below the top 6, you're not really going to get much more out of them than he's got out of us, which is European qualification and safety. So like Crystal Palace, is he going to do more with them than he's with us? No. Have they got more money than us? Not really. Hodgson hasn't spent anything, so I can't see why he'd go there. Those kind of clubs, I'm not worried about them, but it's the clubs that have got a bit of potential. So like West Ham, Villa, I think those are the most 2 likely destinations for him, and that's because they chuck £100 million at it every year. And I think if Aston Villa go down, or even if they stay up, I could see them sacking Dean Smith. It's a lot nearer his family home. It's a bigger club, more chance of investment. I could easily see him going there if they wanted to offer him the job. West Ham, ditto. £100 million at it every year. It's a bit of a manager's graveyard. Everyone seems to fail there, but if you're a manager like Dyche, you back yourself. And I think again, if they stay up or go down and they dispense with the service of Moyes, and I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if they didn't dispense with the service of Moyes at the end of the season, he'd be a prime candidate for them, I'm sure. And if they offered him the job, I think he'd go there. So those two, I can see that happening. And the only sort of hope we've got, I think, if that scenario arose, is that Villa and West Ham will be a bit put off by the sort of long ball tag that he's got. Obviously, it did for Allardyce at West Ham. That the fans got on Allardyce's back because he didn't play the quote unquote West Ham way. I think that was because he won a few games. I think that's what put them off the West Ham way. And I don't think Villa have really got a style of play out there. I don't think they're sort of renowned for anything. I think the last few years they'd just be glad to have a few wins on the board. So, I couldn't see them not wanting him. So that's the only hope we'd have, I think. But I think if either of them two have got managerial vacancies in the summer, and I can see them both having him, if they came in for Dyche, he'd be gone, I think.
Yeah, I think they're the two that I would be most worried about, and I would be worried about. A lot of people are saying, "Well, if Villa go down, he won't go there." But actually, I agree. I think he would. If Villa go down, they've got the money anyway, and now with the parachute payments of the Premier League, they absolutely have money to spend. They should come straight back up. You would expect. We don't often say that a lot about relegated sides because you don't think it's going to be done, but I genuinely think they will. They're going to lose Grealish for sure. I think he'll leave in the summer, irrespective of whether Villa manager a last gasp escape or not. Just the one thing though that I would pick up on this, Tom, and I agree with you, it's very attractive to a manager to be given 100 million every season to spend on players, but Dyche has got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about the price of players. And he has, we are told, if reports in the press are right, that there has been some deals that he has scuppered or that haven't gone through because Dyche didn't agree with other clubs' pricing of players and what they valued of them. He said, no, that player's not worth it. So does it actually in that sense matter how much of a transfer budget a club's given him if he isn't going to spend it because he's going to veto deals if he doesn't agree with the price? We know he does that.
I think the thing you've got to remember when he's vetoing these deals, it'll be because, so let's say, I'm just pulling figures out the air now, but let's say the board have said to him, you've got £40 million to spend this summer, you can spend it on what you want. and someone quotes him, let's say, the famous one was always Ross McCormack, wasn't it? It was £10 million for Ross McCormack, and that's ruined the market. So he might think, well, yeah, I want Ross McCormack, and at the end of the day, it's not my money. It's not coming out of my pocket, so I've got no qualms of spending it. But if I put £10 million down for McCormack and £5 million on the wages and whatever else, the agent's fees, have I got enough left to buy what I want if I need 4 players? No. So if that's the case, even though he might not, excuse me, be bothered about paying that individual price, he might bulk at what a chunk that's going to take out of his budget. And I think talking about the budgets in the press is a bit of a tactic to try and get teams to drop their costs. Whereas if you're Sean Dyche and the Aston Villa chairman says, I've got £150 million to spend, I don't care if you spend 20 million quid on Wesley or whatever, some of the rubbish they bought this summer. I don't care if you want to spend however much on Tyrone Mings. Then he's not bothered. I'll waste a load of money. I'll be in the relegation zone in January and they'll come and give me another 50 million quid like they did with Dean Smith. So I don't think he's that bothered. I mean, it's a tactic in the media. It's a clever one to play if you're Burnley and you've got a finite amount of resources. But as I say, at the end of the day, it's not his money. So if it's not coming out of his pocket, why would he mind where it goes?
That is an excellent point, Tom. A very good summary. Robbie, let's get into Dreamland then, because we're going to come on to talk about the Watford and Palace results before we finish off for the night. Let's assume that we continue to defy, quite frankly, all logic in this season, and with the threadbare squad with Eric Peters on the wing and Matty Vidra playing up front on his own, that we do manage to get into Europe next season. Is that enough to persuade Dyche to stay for one more season, even if one of these jobs comes up?
Possibly, but if the relationship between the manager and the board is already like unrepairable, then I don't think why would you stay around if you're not going to get along with your senior staff. So it's one of them. It's a strange one. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. It's affecting. I know it's affecting me personally because I actually had a dream last night that Sean Dyche signed a new deal. So. So it's what I mean. Like, this football club are breaking me, absolutely breaking me, and it's even affecting me in my fantasy. It's even affecting my sleep now. Like, I haven't been this stressed out. I remember when Owen Coyle was
oh God, don't mention his name.
Where he were leaving us to go Bolton, I literally had sleepless nights, and I've not had that since then, and it's legit happening again.
You didn't have sleepless nights when Brian Laws was in charge, facing United away.
I think that was. I think it was more the prospects of Robbie Blake signing for Bolton that did that.
You probably had nightmares dreaming about Brian Laws signing contract, did you?
Leon Court part of back 4. That gave me nightmares.
Excellent. How do you feel about Europe, Robbie? I know, listen, it's a pipe dream right now, and there'll be some listeners who are rolling their eyes at us and saying, for God's sake, stop it. But it could happen. We've got a relatively comfortable running between now and the end of the season, taking Liverpool out of the equation. How do you feel about Europe, and how do you think the club would approach a second season in the Europa League so soon after the last one, which wasn't what it really lived up to be in the end?
I think we welcome it. I think we probably would have learned a lot from the first time around. I think everyone at the club was new to it, so we didn't really know how to adapt to it, and that goes with in terms of like organising travel and organising hotels and all that sort of. There wasn't much of a time frame between each round, because I think we played like Istanbul Başakşehir, and then 3 days later we found you find out that you're playing Olympiacos, and you have 7 days to turn around flights and hotels, and that's the club sorting out for players and stuff like that. So I think we were all a little bit unprepared for it. So I think the logistics of it, I think the club would be a lot more prepared. It would be a strange one because obviously none of us would be there probably. But I'd certainly love another crack at it. Hopefully it would encourage the board to maybe push the boat out a little bit, give Dyche what he wants, and hopefully it will just be another platform to go on to the next level. But I have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to say, I really want us to get into Europe because I want us to bring back the postcard from series. And of course, that's how we got Tom Whittaker on the podcast. He came on as a guest that very first time with the postcard from Istanbul, which was and still is that last season, that European season, is still our most listened to episode of that season, just from Tom's dulcet tones from his postcard from Istanbul. And we managed to get him on a permanent deal. He came to us on a loan, and we got him in a permanent deal to go forward. So, Tom, what about you? How do you feel about Europe? Do you think we and again, taking aside the fact that we probably won't be able to go in the earlier rounds, do you think it makes a difference how well Wolves have approached it this season? Do you think that will give us a renewed hope that actually you can have both?
It's a funny one, isn't it, with Wolves, because you look at them and think, well, they've got all these players, they spend a load of money, it's no surprise they can do it on two fronts. But then you look at the squad they've got, they're not carrying that many players. They've just been quite lucky to avoid injuries. But other than that, I think they have proved that you can do it with a small squad and still achieve your objectives for the season. I mean, it's not as if we got into Europe, we'd be expecting to be battling for the Champions League like they are. We'd be perfectly happy to get into Europe, have a bit of a run, and stay in the league. And we've proved that's doable previously. So yeah, why not? Why couldn't we do that again? And hopefully, like Robbie said, we've learned a few lessons from last time. The logistics side of it, game management, rotation, things like that. Perhaps we'd have a bit more nous this time. We could have a bit of a crack at it, and hopefully we could stay in it until we were allowed to go. That would be nice.
Oh God, that would be amazing. That would be heartbreaking if we got into Europe again and we didn't get through the qualification round and it was all behind closed doors. I'd be like, no. I think one of the things that we were all excited about with the first European tour was that none of us thought we'd see it in our lifetimes, and we worried we wouldn't see it again. But here we are on the cusp of another entry into Europe. I would love to see it. I'd love to see us get into the group stages because I just think it would be fantastic for the club. And of course, one of the things that's being touted in the press as a solution to our dwindling squad problem is that the club are looking to go into the European market to bring some players in. So let's get into this. Let's get them from there. Let's just go and poach them. And also, I would quite like to get an easier flipping qualification round than the one we got last time to get Aberdeen and Olympiacos. And it was just a ridiculous set of circumstances. So hopefully the fixture gods would be kind to us this time. Tom, sticking with you then, we're going to finish this week's episode just with a little bit of joy, looking at those two fantastic wins against Watford and against Palace. Watford, we'll start with the Watford game. I mean, they're at the wrong end of the table at the moment. They're struggling in terms of a relegation battle. But they're a side that I still just don't think have any business. And I still don't understand why they are at the bottom, because they are a much stronger squad, particularly on paper, than some of the teams at the bottom. But it was very reassuring to me after everything that had happened in the City game, the drubbing we got from them, their injury problems, the contract situation, that we looked ridiculously comfortable against Watford and we gave them a game and we looked the better side for the most of the game.
Yeah, I have to say, after everything that gone on, the performance against Man City, the week that we'd had, the fact that Watford have got a lot more to play for than us, they're battling down there at the wrong end of the table. I thought they'd be well up for it. I thought they'd be fighting. But no, we really held them at arm's length. So really unlucky not to be at least 2-0 up at half time. That lob from Vidra was superb, so unlucky at the post, and then the rebound off the line. Brownhill had a couple of good chances, like I said, a goal disallowed. And you sort of thought when Watford came out and had a bit more of the ball at the start of the second half, you thought perhaps our chance has gone here. But that kind of resolve, that spirit we've seen, and the ridiculous ability we've got to grind out a 1-0 win, it's just amazing. Like, nick a goal from somewhere, just one little bit of quality. It's so clinical. Centre forwards are so clinical. I think they're really underrated, the amount of chances that they do put away. And then it's just classic Burnley, 1-0 up at home with 20 minutes to go. Sit there, defend, and say, if you can break us down and get a goal, come and do it. And so many of these sort of lower end mid-table teams can't do it, and that's why we are where we are. Fantastic defensive performance. Thought Ben Mee and Tarkowski in particular are absolutely fantastic. Don't think Nick Pope really had that much to do, obviously, apart from the one that was cleared off the line before our goal. That last 20 minutes there was no onslaught whatsoever, and just a fantastic Burnley performance. And it was so good to see that despite the lockdown, the 3 months off, nothing had changed in that respect. Still as well drilled and working just as hard as ever.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, Robbie, that defensive performance just spilled straight back into the game against Palace. And this time we'd lost Matt Lawton. Apparently he's had a bit of a knock. And Barsley settled in. But again, at the moment, Lawton and Barsley are a little bit interchangeable. It doesn't really matter which one plays. They put in a decent performance. But again, particularly, I thought we were very comfortable in the first half against Palace, but certainly in the second half, Roy got those Palace players out and fighting for those points. And it was, I think somebody in the press, it might have been in the Guardian article, said that we are the epitome of the football brick wall. And it's just, when they are stubborn and they want to put their head to every single ball and they will block every single shot, there is nothing getting through that defence.
Yeah, I've never seen us... never really seen us win so many like second balls. I think it was like almost like a typical Sean Dyche performance. When we've gone on like a 4 or 5 defeats on the bounce, and then we grind out like a 1-0 win. It was almost like that, where we had to do the ugly stuff really, really well. But I thought we did it with a bit more of a tempo. Like I thought we had a bit of zip to our passing. I thought the first half it looked so comfortable, and it wasn't just like the performance itself. It was the change in formation. Like obviously we had to change with Dwight McNeil playing in number 10. We had Eric Peters, our second choice left back at left midfield, and he slotted in absolutely perfectly. And McNeil in that sort of like free roaming role was absolutely outstanding. The way like he just finds like half yard, drifts past somebody, and just like all this space to run into. He was like, obviously like he's been linked with like Manchester City in the last couple of weeks, and you can sort of understand why now. But yeah, just that defensive resolve, and it was one of them. As soon as we went 1-0 up, I was actually quite comfortable. I actually had every single bit of confidence that we we're going to see the game out, and I'm so pleased that, and obviously like Ben Mee getting the winner as well, just sort of was a fitting end to what had been sort of like a traumatic week.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice to see as well that just Ben Mee was the man of the match for me against Palace by a long way. It was just amazing to see him put that fantastic header in one end, and literally within minutes, like the next action in the game, he was clearing it away with a header in the other box. Tom, how did you feel about McNeil playing in that number 10 role? Because I know you were a particular fan of this.
Yeah, he was fantastic, wasn't he? It's a shame we can't clone him and have one on the left-hand side and one at number 10. His feet are just so good; it's like glued to him, and the pace that he can run with the ball at his feet and not lose it is terrific. You see a lot of players knock and run. He's running 20 yards with the ball glued to his tail the whole time, and obviously we got the goal from that. He beat McCarthy all ends up and won the free kick, and it's not something we're used to seeing from our midfield with Dyche. Obviously Westwood and Cork are very much give it and go water carrier kind of players. And even when Hendrick was playing number 10, not very often you saw him get on the ball and run with it. So yeah, it was really exciting, and another string to his bow. Maybe he'll put a few more £1 million on his transfer fee.
I would hope so. Do you think it made a difference, Tom, not having Wood and Barnes up front, and particularly in the last game when poor Matty was up front by himself? We can't play the long ball. We can't play a direct route of football because Matty's not going to bring balls down in the box. You're not going to put it on his head. We had to play through midfield, and that to me made the game way more entertaining. I thoroughly enjoyed that Palace game, and I didn't expect to at all.
Yeah, when you saw that team sheet before the game, I thought, God, it's going to be a long 90 minutes. Obviously McNeil made a massive difference in that middle, and I thought Vidra was fantastic as well, playing that lone centre forward role.
Yeah, it was.
Built for that. The amount of times he'd have the back to goal, centre half right up his arse, 40, 50 yards from goal, and every time it'd be at some little flick or he'd win a free kick, and he'd find feet every time. I thought it's such a thankless task running that when you're that kind of size player doing that job, and he was fantastic. So massive mention for him. And then, like you say, the passing just so much better than we used to seeing, and it just shows you, Dyche has got more than one string to his bow. If we need to play a different way, then we're capable of doing it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Matty Vidri. He had a bit of a spell where he was obviously a little bit vocal. His frustrations had got the better of him, and he'd come out and been a bit vocal in the press about how unhappy he wasn't playing and stuff, and we were a bit worried that was going to be him out the door. And then there was, of course, the campaign where all the Burnley fans were singing his name from the terrace. But when he scored that goal, his Premier League debut, and his little face, and when he came out in his interview and said that he was cheering with all his mates, he cemented a place in my heart forever. Robbie, final word from you then. Next up, Sheffield United away. Is it away? Is it home? It might be home.
No, it's at home, isn't it? It's at home.
Is it home? Yeah. I've lost.
Do you not remember? We had an absolute shambolic performance at Bramwell Lane.
Oh, of course. We were like 3-0 down at half time.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Something, yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was a tough.
Yeah, that was probably the worst we've played. Yeah. That and City this season have been the worst we've played. So they're up next at home, and I would suggest that if you were going to create a league, Robbie, of clubs that have been most affected by the lockdown period, I would put Sheffield United right at the top of there, because they were having a fantastic season, and the momentum really seems to. Sorry, the break seems to have completely killed their momentum. And I sniff a victory for Burnley at this game. What do you think?
Yeah, so do I. I think it's certainly a 6-pointer for Europa League. I feel Sheffield United, because obviously you just mentioned the momentum there, and then obviously they were the first game back, and they had the goal line technology farce. So obviously they would have had a goal standing. They probably would have gone on to win that game against Villa. So that's probably impacted them as well. But hopefully we can take advantage of that. Obviously we're strong at home anyway, and I think under normal circumstances you probably will back us to try and grind out a point or even win it 1-0. So hopefully that. I think they've been missing a couple of defenders. I think John Egan's out. I think O'Connell's out. I think there are two key defenders for them. I think they're both out of the game. So hopefully we can take advantage of that. Hopefully, I'm just concerned about our lack of depth, and maybe tired legs might come into it. Obviously, we absolutely put our bodies on the line against Palace and stuff, and obviously we don't know the situation with Jack Cork. Obviously, before we started recording, you said that he's on crutches.
Yeah. So
we don't really know what formation we're going to play. Are we going to play Matthew Lawson in central midfield just to cover a body?
Well, the rumours are Lawton's out for the rest of the season. We think he's got a stress fracture, so he's done.
Well, can we just pause the football season again?
I've got to say, when you started that segment, Robbie, by saying that unfortunately Sheffield United got 1 or 2 players out, I was like, mate, I have no sympathy for Sheffield United and missing players. Are you kidding me? We'll be playing, I don't even know who we'll be playing. But there is some rumblings, I think, of a few players that are in light training, aren't they? So we might get 1 or 2 of them back. Who knows? Quick score prediction then, Robbie?
I'll go 1-0 Burnley.
Fine. Tom?
I think one thing that might help is in terms of legs and that. I think Sheffield United are playing tomorrow night, so Thursday night, so we'll have a few more days resting them. So hopefully that will help. So on that basis, I'll say we'll sneak it 1-0 as usual. Yeah, I'm going to say 2-0. I think we're going to win. So that is a clean sweep for Claret Wins from your panellists this evening. And that brings us to the end of our first proper full podcast back. It has been a pleasure entertaining you with the shenanigans that have been going on this week at Turf Moor. What a week it's been. It's been up, down, left, right, goodness knows what's going on. Thank you as ever to my 2 panellists, Robbie Kopak and Tom Whittaker, who give their insight into what's been going on and obviously their analysis of the game. Thank you both. Producer Matt, as ever, who I keep calling on the preview show Producer Dave, which is absolutely so rude, and he's going to quit before long and I won't be able to produce a podcast. So Producer Matt, thank you very much for knitting this together and getting our podcast out. Band Joyce for providing us with the theme music for our podcast, which is much appreciated. But of course, my final thanks go to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this podcast. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. We will be back at some point next week. I suspect we'll probably
probably do the Sheffield United game and the West Ham game together, albeit I'm a bit conscious we've then got a very quick turnaround between West Ham and whatever game is next on the Saturday. So bear with us and we'll get something out next week. I'm just not sure when that will be. But both Dave and I will be back on Friday for the Friday night preview show, looking ahead to Sheffield United. So we will see you then. Any questions, anything you want to raise, any feedback, you know how to get in touch with us. But that's it. So I have been Natalie Bromley. This has been the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.